3 years had passed since the Great Exodus began. Earth's orbit looked different now, crowded with massive defense platforms and shipyards that had never existed before. The blue planet below bustled with activity as millions of returning colonists found new homes and new purposes. Dr. Amy Foster stood in her laboratory deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by holographic displays showing impossible equations. Her team of scientists worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge further than ever before. Without access to galactic libraries and alien research, they had been forced to innovate in ways that surprised even themselves. "The quantum resonance is stabilizing," called out Dr. Peter Walsh from across the room. He was monitoring a device that hummed with barely contained energy. "The new drive system is holding steady at 97% efficiency." Amy nodded, her eyes never leaving the data streaming across her screens. The Council had cut humanity off from galactic trade routes, but they had also freed human scientists from the restrictive research protocols that had limited their work for decades. Every breakthrough felt like a small victory against the species that had cast them out. "Have you seen the reports from Mars?" asked Dr. Linda Cruz, looking up from her calculations. "Colonel Bennett's shipyards are ahead of schedule. They're building vessels faster than anyone thought possible." On Mars, the red planet had transformed into something unrecognizable. Colonel Steve Bennett walked through the massive construction, bays carved into the planet's surface, watching as automated systems assembled spacecraft that dwarfed anything humanity had built before. The air recyclers worked constantly to clear the metallic dust from the atmosphere, but nothing could hide the scale of what they were accomplishing. "Status report," Steve called to his operations manager. "Bay 7 just completed another heavy cruiser," came the reply. "That's 12 this month. The mining operations are keeping pace with demand, and we've got enough raw materials for at least 50 more vessels." Steve smiled grimly. The Council had expected humanity to retreat to their home system and stay there quietly. Instead, they had turned Sol into the most heavily fortified and industrialized system in the galaxy. Every asteroid belt had been stripped of useful metals. Every gas giant had floating refineries harvesting fuel and rare elements. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Hayes guided her ship through the darkness beyond the outer rim. The vessel that had once been called the UES Defiance now bore the name Retribution, and its hull showed the scars of 3 years spent exploring the unknown reaches of space. Her crew had mapped 17 new star systems and made contact with 6 non-aligned species. "Captain," called her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Tau Ceti system." "It's not Council frequency." Lisa leaned forward in her command chair. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to a species she had never seen before. The being had gray skin marked with intricate patterns, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient and weary. "I am Governor Kell of the Tau Ceti Alliance," the alien said. "We have heard rumors of the human exile. We wish to speak with your representatives. What do you want to discuss?" Lisa asked carefully. "Freedom," Kell replied simply. "The Council's taxes grow heavier each year. Their regulations strangle our trade. We are not the only ones who question their authority." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly what Admiral Kane had hoped. For when he sent her on these long-range missions, "We would be honored to meet with your representatives." Back on Earth, Admiral Richard Kane sat in his underground command center, studying reports from across human space. The walls around him displayed tactical information, ship movements, and intelligence gathered from a dozen different sources. His staff worked quietly at their stations, coordinating the greatest military buildup in human history. "Sir," his aide approached with a datapad. "The latest production figures from the Luna shipyards? We're exceeding projections by 30%. Kane took the pad and scanned the numbers. Humanity had always been good at mass production, but the urgency of their situation had driven them to new levels of efficiency. "What about the new weapon systems?" "Dr. Foster's team has completed the first phase shift torpedoes. Initial tests show they can pass through conventional shields and armor. The quantum cannons are still in development, but the prototypes are promising. Kane nodded. The Council had superior numbers, but human ingenuity was creating weapons and defenses that alien science couldn't match. Any word from our deep space scouts? Captain Hayes reports successful contact with the Tau Ceti Alliance. They're requesting a formal diplomatic meeting. Captain Murphy has similar news from the Vega sector. It seems our exile has given other species ideas about independence. The Admiral allowed himself a small smile. The Council had thought they were solving a problem by removing humanity from the galactic community. Instead, they had created a much bigger problem for themselves. Species that had been quietly resentful of Council rule were now seeing that resistance was possible. In the civilian sectors of Earth, the mood was very different from the despair of 3 years ago. President William Carter addressed the Global Assembly from the restored United Nations building in New York. The chamber was packed with representatives from every human nation, along with delegates from the returning colonies. My fellow humans, Carter began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber and beyond to the billions watching on screens across the system. We stand at a crossroads. The Council thought they were punishing us, but they have given us the greatest gift possible, the chance to build something better. The applause was thunderous. Carter waited for it to die down before continuing. We will not simply survive this exile, we will thrive. We will show the galaxy what humanity can accomplish when we are free to pursue our own destiny. Dr. Foster's voice crackled through the secure communication system connecting all the major facilities. The Genesis Engine project is ready for the next phase. We can transform dead worlds into garden planets in decades instead of centuries. Any species that joins us will have access to unlimited living space. Colonel Bennett's report followed immediately. The fleet is ready for deployment. We have enough ships to protect a dozen star systems, with more coming online every month. Admiral Kane synthesized all the information into a simple conclusion. The Council created their own worst nightmare. They wanted to keep humanity contained. But they've actually created the conditions for us to build our own empire. An empire based on voluntary association instead of imposed authority. As the meeting concluded, each leader returned to their work with renewed purpose. The Council had cast humanity out, expecting them to fade into obscurity. Instead, they had created a force that would reshape the galaxy itself. The only question now was how long it would take for the rest of the universe to realize what was coming. 5 years after the banishment, the galaxy was burning. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the refugee ships streaming out of the Rigel system. The once peaceful trade hub had become a battleground between the Hive Queen's expanding forces and the Crystalline Confederacy's desperate defenders. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving distress signals from 17 different vessels. They're requesting asylum in human space." Lisa studied the tactical display. The Council had promised that removing humanity would bring peace to the galaxy. Instead, without human peacekeepers to maintain order, old conflicts had reignited with devastating fury. The Hive Queen's forces had seized 4 systems in the past year alone, while the Zephyrians had imposed crushing taxes on their subject worlds. "Open a channel to all refugee ships," Lisa ordered. "This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Fleet. You are welcome in our space. We will provide escort to the nearest safe harbor." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of alien voices filled the communication channels, expressing gratitude in languages from across the galaxy. These were not the proud Council members who had voted to exile humanity. These were ordinary beings whose lives had been shattered by the wars that followed. Captain Ryan Murphy brought his ship alongside the flagship, his vessel's hull still bearing scorch marks from the last skirmish with Hive forces. "Admiral, we've got 3 more systems requesting protection. The Council can't or won't defend them," Lisa nodded grimly. "Signal Earth, it's time to expand our operations." On Earth, President William Carter stood before a packed session of the Global Assembly. The chamber buzzed with excitement as representatives from 47 different species filled the observer galleries. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that humanity was offering protection to anyone who asked for it. "Today marks a new chapter in galactic history," Carter announced. "We are no longer just the human species. We are the Terran Empire, and we welcome all who seek freedom from oppression." The applause was thunderous, coming not just from human delegates but from the alien observers as well. A delegation of tree people had arrived just that morning, their bioships having traveled for months to reach Earth. They brought news that 6 entire forest worlds had declared independence from the Council. Dr. Amy Foster sat in the front row, her hands resting on the control tablet for her greatest creation. The Genesis engine had been tested successfully on 3 dead worlds in the Outer Rim, transforming barren rocks into lush planets capable of supporting life. The technology had become humanity's greatest diplomatic tool. "The Genesis project is ready for full deployment," she announced when called upon. "We can offer new worlds to any species that joins our alliance. No more fighting over limited resources. No more crowded colonies or dying planets." The reaction from the alien delegates was immediate and passionate. A representative of the aquatic species rose from his environmental tank, his gills fluttering with excitement. "My people have been confined to 3 ocean worlds for centuries. The Council always promised us new homes but never delivered. You offer us the galaxy itself." Meanwhile, Colonel Steve Bennett was dealing with more practical concerns on Mars. The red planet's surface was now dotted with massive launch complexes, each one capable of deploying entire fleets at a moment's notice. The construction crews worked around the clock, building the infrastructure of an empire. "Sir," his production manager approached with the latest reports, "we've completed the first batch of colony ships. Each one can transport 50,000 settlers and establish a complete planetary base within 6 months." Steve studied the massive vessels taking shape in the orbital shipyards. Unlike the sterile Council designs, these ships were built for long-term habitation. They contained everything needed to establish thriving communities on new worlds, from medical facilities to schools to recreational areas. "How many systems have requested membership this week?" he asked. 14, came the reply. The Tau Ceti Alliance brought in 6 more systems with them. "The Ethereal Collective is formally considering joining us. Even some of the minor Council members are sending unofficial representatives." The news from across the galaxy continued to pour in. The methane breathers had split into 2 factions, with the younger generation favoring alliance with humanity while the elders clung to Council membership. The silicon-based life forms had begun trading rare minerals for human technology. Despite Council prohibitions, Admiral Kane sat in his command center coordinating the massive expansion of human influence. The tactical displays showed Terran ships in dozens of systems, protecting trade routes and establishing new colonies. What had begun as a defensive alliance was rapidly becoming something much larger. "The Council is finally taking notice," his intelligence officer reported. "Zephyrian fleets are moving to blockade the rebellious systems. They're demanding that we withdraw our protection." Kane smiled coldly. "Signal Admiral Hayes, it's time to test our new weapons in combat." The confrontation came sooner than expected. The Zephyrian Third Fleet, composed of 200 crystalline warships, entered the Proxima system with the intention of forcing the human colonists to abandon their new worlds. They found Admiral Hayes waiting for them with 50 Terran vessels. "This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Empire. Lisa broadcast on all frequencies. You are entering sovereign territory. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Zephyrian commander's response was predictable. "Humans have no authority here. These worlds belong to the Council. You will surrender or be destroyed." Lisa looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. All ships, weapons free. Show them what humanity has learned. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy's balance of power shifted forever. The Zephyrian fleet, confident in their superior numbers, charged directly at the human formation. They expected the short, brutal engagement that had characterized galactic warfare for millennia. Instead, they encountered weapons and tactics beyond their comprehension. The Terran ships phased in and out of normal space, their new drives allowing them to strike from impossible angles. Quantum torpedoes passed through enemy shields as if they didn't exist. Energy weapons that could slice through crystalline armor like paper within hours. The Zephyrian fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind the wreckage of 60 ships. The Terran fleet had suffered only minor damage. The message was clear: humanity had not spent their exile in quiet contemplation. They had used every moment to become something the galaxy had never seen before. As news of the victory spread, 17 more systems declared independence from the Council and requested Terran protection. The empire that had begun as a desperate alliance of outcasts was becoming a force that could challenge the established order of the galaxy itself. The victory at Proxima had changed everything. Within weeks of the battle, news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Council forces that had seemed invincible for thousands of years had been crushed by human technology and tactics. Species that had lived under Council rule for generations began to whisper about freedom. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the construction of humanity's first major starbase outside the Sol system. The massive structure grew larger each day, its weapons platforms and docking bays a clear message to anyone who might challenge Terran authority in this sector. "Ma'am," Captain Ryan Murphy approached with the latest intelligence reports. "We've received formal requests for alliance from 43 different systems. The Ethereal Collective has agreed to a full military partnership. Even some of the Council's oldest members are sending secret diplomats." Lisa nodded, still watching the construction crews at work. "What about the Hive Queen's response?" "She's pulled her forces back to defensive positions. Our intelligence suggests she's lost 3 major battles this month alone. The species she conquered are rising up, and they're using weapons we've provided." The transformation of the galaxy had been swift and dramatic. The Genesis engines had begun their work on dozens of dead worlds, creating new homes for species that had been crowded into inadequate territories for centuries. Trade routes that had been controlled by Council regulations for millennia were now open to all who joined the Terran Empire. On Earth, President William Carter met with representatives from the Ethereal Collective in the newly constructed Imperial Palace. The building rose from the ruins of the old United Nations headquarters, its design incorporating architectural elements from every member species of the growing empire. "Your people have surprised us," the ethereal representative said, its silver skin shimmering in the afternoon light. "We have observed galactic politics for 10,000 years, but we have never seen change happen so quickly." Carter smiled. "Humanity has always been good at adapting. When the Council cast us out, they thought they were solving a problem. Instead, they gave us the freedom to show what we could really accomplish." The ethereal's eyes, deep as space itself, studied the human leader. "The Council is gathering its remaining forces. They will not accept the loss of half the galaxy without a fight." "Let them come," Carter replied. "We're ready." Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Foster worked in her expanded laboratory complex, now staffed by scientists from 17 different species. The fusion of human innovation with alien knowledge had produced technological breakthroughs that neither could have achieved alone. The latest Genesis engine designs could terraform entire star systems in just a few years. "The quantum field generators are online," reported Dr. Walsh, his excitement barely contained. "We can create stable wormholes between any 2 points in the galaxy. Travel time between our furthest colonies will be reduced to hours instead of months." Amy smiled as she watched the test results. The Council had always restricted such research, claiming it was too dangerous. But the combination of human determination and ethereal, psionic abilities had solved problems that had puzzled scientists for generations. General Patricia Lewis stood in the war room on Mars, studying the galactic map that covered an entire wall. Red markers showed Council-controlled systems, while blue indicated Terran Empire territory. The blue was spreading faster than anyone had expected. "Ma'am," her aide approached with the latest battle reports. "The Vega Liberation Front has successfully overthrown the Council garrison. They're requesting immediate support to defend against the counterattack. Patricia nodded, moving blue markers to show the new territories. Deploy the 7th Fleet. Make sure they understand that any attack on our allies is an attack on us. The doctrine of the Terran Empire was simple but effective. Any species that requested protection would receive it, regardless of their size or resources. In return, they contributed what they could to the common defense. The result was a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Colonel Steve Bennett supervised the launch of the largest fleet in human history from the orbital shipyards around Mars. 150 ships of various classes prepared for what would be the decisive battle of the war. The Council had finally assembled their full remaining strength for one last attempt to crush the human rebellion. All ships report ready, his communications officer announced. Admiral Hayes is requesting permission to engage. Steve watched the massive vessels disappear into hyperspace. Their destination, the ancient Council homeworld of Kepler Prime. The battle would determine whether the Terran Empire would become the new galactic power or be destroyed by the forces of the old order. The engagement began 3 days later in the outer system of Kepler Prime. The Council had assembled over 300 ships, drawing vessels from every member species. The crystalline forms of Zephyrian dreadnoughts floated alongside the organic curves of hive vessels and the geometric patterns of silicon-based warships. Admiral Hayes studied the enemy formation from her command chair. They're using traditional tactics, she observed. Massed formations, frontal assault, overwhelming firepower. They haven't learned anything from our previous encounters. Captain Murphy's ship led the first wave of the attack, his vessel's phase shift drives allowing it to appear directly behind the enemy flagship. The quantum torpedoes he launched passed through the Council ship's shields and armor as if they were made of air, detonating inside the vessel's core. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Terran ships flickered in and out of normal space, striking from impossible angles before vanishing again. The Council forces, trained in the rigid formations of traditional warfare, could not adapt to the fluid tactics of their enemies, but the most devastating weapon was not technological, it was psychological. As the battle raged, ships from Council member species began to change sides. The Tree People vessels suddenly turned their weapons on their former allies. The aquatic forces withdrew from the battle entirely. Even some of the Zephyrian ships began broadcasting surrender signals. The Council is collapsing, Admiral Hayes reported to Earth. Half their fleet has either surrendered or joined us. The remainder are retreating to their core worlds. The victory was complete, but Hayes knew it was only the beginning. The old order was dying, but building something better would require all the wisdom and strength that humanity and its allies could muster. The galaxy was free, but now they had to decide what to do with that freedom. As the last Council ships disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel to the planet below. This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Empire. Kepler Prime is now under our protection. Any who wish to join us in building a better galaxy are welcome. The response came not from the Council chambers, but from the people of the planet itself. Millions of voices, representing dozens of species, called out in celebration. The age of the Council was over. The age of the Empire had begun. 2 years after the Battle of Kepler Prime, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before humanity's exile. The old Council station had been converted into a massive diplomatic complex, where representatives from over 200 species worked together to build something unprecedented in galactic history. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through the corridors that had once echoed with the voices of those who had condemned his species. Now those same halls buzzed with the sounds of cooperation and hope. He paused at the great window that overlooked the conference chamber where the new Galactic Assembly was in session. "It's hard to believe," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see the ethereal representative who had been humanity's only supporter during that fateful vote 7 years ago. "When I voted against your exile, I hoped I was preventing a tragedy. I never imagined I was helping to birth a new age." Jake smiled, remembering that terrible day when everything seemed lost. Your people have a saying about the longest journey beginning with a single step. Sometimes the most important step is the one that takes you away from the wrong path. Inside the assembly chamber, President William Carter stood before delegates representing every inhabited world in the galaxy. The old council had never allowed such participation, restricting membership to only the oldest and most powerful species. The Terran Empire had changed that, welcoming every voice that sought to be heard. Today we vote on the Imperial Charter. Carter announced to the gathered assembly. This document will establish the principles that guide our future together. Freedom of movement between worlds. Protection for all member species. The right to self-determination. And most importantly, the promise that no species will ever again be cast out for being different. The vote was unanimous. Every delegate, from the smallest mining colony to the most ancient civilization, supported the charter that would reshape galactic society. The old system of rule by fear and intimidation was officially dead. Admiral Lisa Hayes watched the ceremony from the bridge of her flagship, now orbiting the station as part of the honor guard. Her fleet had grown to include vessels from dozens of different species, their varied designs creating a beautiful tapestry against the stars. The ship beside hers was commanded by a former Hive Queen officer who had joined the Empire after seeing how differently it treated its members. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. The Genesis terraforming projects are ahead of schedule. 17 new worlds will be ready for colonization within." The year Lisa nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction. The galaxy that had once seemed too small to contain all its competing species now had room for everyone. Dr. Foster's machines were creating new worlds faster than they could be populated, offering hope to species that had fought over resources. For millennia, on one of those new worlds, children played in gardens that had been barren rock just 5 years before. Human youngsters ran alongside young ethereals, tree people saplings, and even small aquatic beings in environmental suits. They laughed together in the universal language of joy, unaware that their friendship would have been impossible under the old council system. Dr. Amy Foster stood in her laboratory on Earth, watching live feeds from across the galaxy. Her Genesis engines worked on 47 different worlds, each one customized for the species that would call it home. Ocean worlds for the aquatics, crystal gardens for the silicon-based life forms, methane atmospheres for the gas breathers. "The efficiency improvements are remarkable," Dr. Walsh reported, studying the latest data. "Working with alien scientists has taught us things we never could have discovered alone. The ethereal understanding of quantum mechanics, combined with tree people biological knowledge and human engineering, has created something truly miraculous." Amy smiled as she watched a time-lapse video of a dead moon transforming into a lush forest world. The Council had always claimed that such rapid terraforming was impossible, but they had never tried combining the knowledge of multiple species. Fear had made them weak, while cooperation had made the Empire strong. General Patricia Lewis reviewed the final reports from across the galaxy. The last holdout Council worlds had finally agreed to join the Empire rather than face isolation. Even the Zephyrian homeworld had requested membership after their people voted to remove the government that had led them into disaster. "What about the former Council leaders?" her aide asked, referring to the beings who had ordered humanity's exile. "They'll face trial for their crimes," Patricia replied. "But under Empire law, not Council law. They'll have the right to defense, to appeal, to be treated with dignity. We won't become like them." The trials took place on the old Council station, in the same chamber where humanity had been condemned. But now the accused sat where Jake Morrison had once stood, facing justice from the species they had oppressed for so long. The Zephyrian representative, who had led the vote against humanity, stood before the tribunal, its crystalline form dimmed with shame. "I believed we were protecting the galaxy from chaos," it said in its wind chime voice. "I was wrong. The humans brought change, yes, but change was what we needed." The Hive Queen's testimony was more defiant. "I regret nothing," she buzzed through her translator. I acted in what I believed were the best interests of my species. And that was your mistake, Jake Morrison replied from the prosecutor's bench. You forgot that all our species share the same galaxy. What hurts one of us hurts all of us. The sentences were fair but firm. The former council leaders would spend their remaining years in comfortable exile, forbidden from holding public office, but free to live peaceful lives. It was more mercy than they had shown to the countless species they had oppressed. But the Empire had chosen to be better than its enemies. Emperor William Carter stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace on Earth, looking up at the stars that now belonged to all the galaxy's children. The ceremony marking the official end of council rule had concluded, and representatives from every world were returning home to spread the news. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the council had accepted us? Asked Admiral Kane, joining the Emperor on the balcony. Carter considered the question. We'd probably still be junior partners in someone else's empire, following rules we had no part in making. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as punishments. As the last of the diplomatic ships departed Earth's orbit, carrying delegates back to worlds across the galaxy, Carter smiled. Humanity had been cast out for being too dangerous, too unpredictable, too different. In the end, those very qualities had saved not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy. The age of fear was over, the age of hope had begun. And it had all started with a single word spoken in defiance. No. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the alien space station grow larger on the main screen. The massive structure looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness around the gas giant Kepler 442b. Its silver petals stretched out for miles in every direction, and tiny lights blinked along its surface like stars. Jake felt nervous sweat on his forehead as he stared at humanity's first real chance to join the galactic community. For 30 years, Earth had been listening to alien radio signals and learning their languages. Now, the Galactic Council had finally agreed to meet with humans face to face. Captain, the station is requesting our approach vector, said Lieutenant Commander Amy Johnson from her position at the security station. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun and her brown eyes stayed focused on her screens. Amy had been Jake's security chief for 5 years and he trusted her completely. Jake nodded and turned to his communications officer. Send them our diplomatic codes and request docking permission. The reply came back in perfect English through their translation systems. Human vessel New Horizon, you are cleared for docking bay 7. Please follow the guidance beacons and prepare for inspection upon arrival. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge carrying a thick folder of papers. She wore her best diplomatic uniform and her blonde hair was styled perfectly, but Jake could see the worry in her blue eyes. Lisa had spent months preparing for this moment and studying every piece of alien culture data they had collected. Captain, I've reviewed the protocols one more time, Lisa said as she sat down in the chair next to Jake. The Council has very strict rules about first contact meetings. We must show respect for their hierarchy at all times. No weapons are allowed on the station. We cannot make any aggressive gestures or raise our voices. Jake frowned as he listened to the long list of restrictions. What about normal diplomatic immunity? They don't recognize that concept, Lisa replied with a sigh. Every species gets classified based on their homeworld's danger rating. The safer your planet, the higher your status in their society. Dr. Kevin Walsh entered the bridge carrying his tablet computer. The tall scientist had been studying alien biology for months, and his green eyes looked troubled behind his glasses. Captain, I've been analyzing the data they sent us about their classification system. Earth has been rated as a Class 12 death world. What does that mean exactly? Jake asked. Kevin's face went pale as he read from his tablet. It means they consider Earth to be the most dangerous type of planet possible. Extreme weather, deadly animals, poisonous plants, natural disasters, and violent geological activity. According to their records, no civilized species has ever evolved on a Class 12 world. Amy looked up from her station with concern. So what does that make us? Barbarians, Kevin said quietly. They expect us to be violent and primitive. The protocols Lisa mentioned aren't just suggestions. They're requirements for what they call dangerous species management. Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. We'll follow their rules for now. This is too important to mess up because of pride, engineer. Rick Peters joined them on the bridge, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. His brown hair was messy and his work uniform was stained, but his mind was one of the sharpest Jake had ever encountered. Captain, the ship is ready for docking. I've, shut down all weapon systems and locked them with command codes like they requested. Good work, Rick, Jake said. How long until we reach the station? About 20 minutes, sir. The next 20 minutes passed in tense silence as the New Horizon approached the massive alien structure. Jake watched through the viewports as they passed by sections of the station that looked like small cities. Thousands of different alien ships were docked at various levels, and he could see creatures moving around behind transparent barriers. Look at the size of this place, Amy whispered. There must be millions of aliens living here. The Council represents over 800 different species, Lisa said. This station serves as their neutral meeting ground and administrative center. The New Horizon finally reached Docking Bay 7 and Jake felt the ship shake slightly as the alien docking clamps engaged. Green lights appeared on the control panels and Rick nodded to confirm they were securely attached. Atmospheric composition is safe for humans, Kevin reported. Temperature is a bit warm but within acceptable limits. Jake stood up and straightened his uniform. Lisa, you'll take the lead on all diplomatic contacts. Kevin, document everything you can about their biology and technology. Amy, stay alert, but don't do anything that might be seen as threatening. Rick, keep the ship ready for immediate departure. If needed, the team gathered their equipment and walked to the airlock. Jake felt his heart beating faster as the inner door sealed behind them. The outer door opened with a soft hiss and they stepped onto the alien station for the first time. The first thing Jake noticed was the smell. The air had a strange metallic taste with hints of something like cinnamon. The corridor they entered was much larger than human ships would need, and the walls curved in odd angles that made his eyes water if he looked at them too long. 6 alien creatures waited for them in the corridor. They looked like giant slugs covered in shimmering blue skin, and they moved by sliding along the floor on their bellies. Their heads had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and their mouths were just small holes that opened and closed as they breathed. One of the creatures spoke in a voice that sounded like music mixed with static. Human delegation, welcome to Council Station Harmony. I am Facilitator Zonthik, and these are my assistants. Please follow us to the processing center. Lisa stepped forward with a diplomatic smile. Thank you for this opportunity, Facilitator. We look forward to establishing peaceful relations between humanity and the Galactic Council. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been amusement. Processing first. Relations later. Old Deathworld species must be evaluated before contact with civilized beings. Jake felt that cold anger again, but kept his face neutral. The team followed their escorts through a maze of corridors filled with amazing sights. They passed aliens of every shape and size imaginable. Some looked like walking trees, while others resembled living crystals. A few seemed to be made of pure energy contained in glowing spheres, but Jake noticed something important. All the aliens they passed fell into 2 clear groups. The ones that looked soft and delicate moved freely through the station and wore decorative clothing or accessories. The ones that looked tough or dangerous were always accompanied by guards and wore simple gray uniforms. After 10 minutes of walking, they reached a large room with white walls and bright lights. It looked like a medical facility mixed with a prison intake center. Metal tables and scanning equipment lined the walls while armed guards stood at every exit. Please place all personal items in the containers provided, Facilitator Zonthik. Sighed. You will be assigned quarters after evaluation is complete. Lisa started to protest. Facilitator, we are an official diplomatic mission from Earth. Surely there's been some mistake. The alien's musical voice turned cold. No mistake. You are Deathworld specimens. You will be processed according to standard protocols. Resistance. will result in immediate termination. Jake looked around the room and saw other aliens in gray, uniforms being scanned and cataloged like livestock. Some looked defeated while others showed quiet anger in their eyes. All of them had come from dangerous worlds, and all of them had been reduced to the same status. The rules were clear now. In this galaxy, might didn't make right. Surviving on a dangerous world made you a slave.